Yeah, I'm pumped about this one. I feel like there's been so many. I just like probably daily get the complaint that clay is too expensive. And well, first of all, I just disagree with that given the value of if you use a tool like how it should be used. But
Yeah,
now it's like what I'm pumped about this webinar in particular is just like it's going to demonstrate ways to use it cheaply, like objectively cheaply, because I mean, when you pitch clay to an enterprise company and you show them the effect it'll have, they don't really blink an eye most of the time. But if you're like, strapped for cash or you're like a startup or you don't have a ton of funding, it can be a little more intimidating. And so using
for
use cases
sure.
like that move people forward a lot
Yeah,
faster, I
no, I
think.
think it's because pe people assume they'll use everything as is and they won't have to tweak anything. And I think for me, well, let's get this started. For me, this webinar kind of kicked off in my head as an idea when it was a Wednesday morning call. We have our calls at 11 a.m. Central European time, where the entire team syncs. And our data analyst comes to me and says, Bill, I have something terrible to share with you. All of our Clay credits have been used. And he's completely freaked out. And it's not because there's something wrong with Clay or a bug or anything. It was because somebody just clicked enrich all on a really long table. So that was the moment when I said, okay, we're at the stage where we have to take things a bit more seriously, and we have to start having some processes around how we use data, how we use Clay in general, and some processes around it. So I was like, okay, if this is interesting for me, I'm sure there'll be other people who are interested about it as well. And I think a big part of the conversation, and we put a lot of work into this webinar, into the content you're going to see, a lot of work like for the slides, for the content, and also for figuring out the process behind it is there's so many things that Clay allows you to do, and the list building process in general is so broad and can happen in so many different ways that no one use case is like the other, right? Like you might just use Clay to enrich a table of existing companies or of existing people. There's different data costs. There's different things that have to do with that. Or you might want to do, segmentation and enrichment using AI. There's a completely different world that happens there. Or you might want to have intent data. For me, it's like we try to map it out, from the end to end. It's like from defining your ICPs, estimating your time, building the accounts list, segmenting by industry, function, seniority, splitting account in tiers, sales triggers, communities, and then finally building the prospect list. And if you look at the steps, you use multiple tools along the way, obviously Clay being a big part of that, but it ends up becoming really confusing. So I have mainly two kinds of expectations from this, and I think everyone joining, it's if you're new to Clay and you're puzzled because there's so many integrations, so many tools, so many APIs, so many flows, webhooks, integrations, and you're like, okay, what the hell do I use? Like even for waterfall enrichment itself, you have to be aware of like 5 or 10 different tools specifically for email finding and being able to compare prices and then being able to stack them one on top of the other to have a good outcome. And then the second one is obviously companies who help handle large data, could be an enterprise or it could be an agency. We definitely are part of that category and want to control their credit usage. And yeah, obviously the end goal is building prospect lists with Clay, within Clay for almost $0 in credits. It all starts by breaking down the process into 5 steps. And that's what allowed us, when we were looking at budgeting for outbound, we have some major cost components, and these are related mostly to the data that we use. So the first one is targeting and sourcing the companies. The second one is company and prospect enrichment, additional details about the companies you want to use. Similarly for the prospects, then it's segmentation. How do we make sure that from the list of 1,000 companies or 1,000 people, we only select the 500 or 600 or 700 that are relevant? And then data cleanup, and finally copywriting and personalization. So it became, even just putting the content for this became a tough exercise because we had to figure out kind of like, okay, where do we start from this? And I think if you look at it, anyone using Clay probably has these 4 or 5 use cases. Maybe not all of them all the time. Maybe some of them, maybe it's just, enrichment and segmentation of CRM data. Maybe it's live intent data and you only want to, I don't know, clean it up and then add it to your CRM or whatever it might be. But in general, if we look at how to budget for Clay credits, we've built everything along the lines of this framework. Targeting and sourcing of companies, company and prospect enrichment, then segmentation, then data cleanup, copywriting and personalization. And along the lines of those five, both the content of the webinar as well as the cost saving techniques are outlined in a way I feel that makes sense. But obviously, if you're in the comments, make sure to hit us up with questions and we'll try to take as many of them in the end as possible. All right, let's start with the first step, targeting sources. So I tried to build a list. It's not by any means exhaustive. It's just like a really simple list, just to indicate that finding the right targeting source is not straightforward. Like you have to look at different sources if you want to target B2B companies, probably the easiest use case. You have to look at different sources if you want to target local businesses or e-commerce stores or target companies that use a really specific technology and only those companies. Similarly, for website visitors, intent-based campaigns, lookalikes, web scraping, if you want to scrape, I don't know, the Amazon listings and add them into Clay. Same for LinkedIn scraping. Even just for LinkedIn scraping, like if someone wants to scrape LinkedIn company followers, event attendees, sales nav, there's all these different tools, like Phantom Buster obviously being one of the most important ones there and most well known, that still have a different cost structure. So we had to put some order in this kind of mess. I think we made it. You can pretty much split list building and in general cold email campaigns and projects into three main categories. The first one is broad B2B ICP targeting and discovering your TAM. So getting a list of the entire list of companies in an industry or targeting companies by a specific industry. The second one is specialized targeting. Let's say I only want to target Shopify stores. And the third one is more ongoing, trigger-based, has high sales intent. It's your website visitors campaigns and what have not. Few examples just to give some context. Broad B2B targeting could be I want to target marketing agencies in the US who have 100+ employees. Really specific how to do it, and probably the easiest one. Second one, I want to target direct-to-consumer brands or e-commerce stores using Shopify Plus or Shopify or BigCommerce with 3 million plus in revenue, or I want to target a specific list that I have from my CRM. Could be dormant leads, could be active pipeline, whatever it is. The last one I think is really obvious, could be new enroll, company news, CRM updates, website visitors. Again, three use cases with really different ways to go about finding the data. And we'll dive deeper into each one of those. So for example, if you want to do broad B2B targeting, Clay is a really easy option. You also have LinkedIn Sales Nav. If you want to do more specialized targeting, you have story leads built with Phantom Buster for LinkedIn, Crunchbase, what have you. And same for trigger-based campaigns. And I know not everyone is using everything. Patrick, just give me a sec. There you are.
Huge. Appreciate it. Well, I'm going to chime in real quick on this. Sorry. But
Go ahead.
I think this is so important to address, and I'm really glad you included this slide because that's really like these are like the way these data sources are segmented. And it's also important to know because this is usually, at least within my agency, and I'm sure it's similar to yours, like how we kind of dictate our campaign strategy. Because the further you go down this list from left to right, the smaller the group of people usually is. Like you can get 50,000 people imported into a Clay table in seconds and it's really easy. But they're not nearly as high intent as like an RB2B campaign would be. And so dictating what channel to use and overall the general strategy you're approaching these campaigns with and like how much personalization you want, et cetera, are all based on these three things. Like, and that's kind of how we bucket it. So I think it's like a perfect description on how to do this.
Exactly. And I'll discuss in a second why even just using a different structure and a different setup, because within Clay, someone could say, you know what, I'll run the entire process end to end. But if you do that, it's probably not the most cost efficient way to do it. So even though, from a technical standpoint, it's easier just knowing one tool, it's probably not the most cost efficient way to use it. There's obviously still ways to use it though. So broad B2B targeting, I'd say it's the easiest one because if you do it within Clay, it's technically for free. The two main ways to do this is using Clay, as it includes if you fetch companies through Clay, it includes the LinkedIn description, company size, and also LinkedIn keywords and exclusion keywords, a lot of other filters as well, and you get the data for free. You get, I think, a little bit more data than Sales Nav, and it's also free. So if you're in part of the first use case and you just want the broad list of companies that you then want to segment in other ways, at least for 50,000 companies, you get it for free. You have to do it with Clay. There's no other way to go about it. The second category is a bit more interesting. Let's say you want to target e-commerce businesses as used as an example. There's no reason to go directly with Clay, because if you do that, I have a screenshot here. Let's say you want to target e-commerce businesses. Let me try and zoom in a little bit. For every company that you fetch, you're going to be charged 1 credit. You don't want to do that. So the easiest way to go about it is literally buy store leads once for 250 for 1 month, and you can export every company that store leads has already scraped from within two different types of companies. So you can do Shopify and Shopify Plus, let's say, or Shopify and BigCommerce, and then you can import the list within Clay, and you can do whatever else you like. And that list already includes the number of products that are within that store. It includes traffic estimates. It includes product photos. It includes a lot of different additional elements that you can use. And this is, I think, like a really, really easy way to go about it. Similarly, if you want to, let's say, scrape LinkedIn posts from your competitors or people who are influencers in an industry, just use Apify and then scrape the data from Apify, import it into Clay, and you're done. You don't have to start every single time from Clay. And that I think is like the most important first kind of step. Similarly, for targeting sources, if you want to use intent-based campaigns, there's additional tools from RB2B to Trigify, Common Room for more enterprise use cases. And yes, some of these intent data tools for now will need the HTTP API knowledge and access to set them up, but they're totally worth it. And the really interesting example here is Trigify, where you can literally have job data, new enroll, news announcements, account-based marketing, and they literally have kind of like an unlimited plan. They do have a credits usage, but they have an unlimited plan, and you can push an unlimited number of job posts within Clay. Uh, Again, a really nice hack. I'm not even going to try and compare the cost savings, because you can literally, for all these sources, you can get the list of every company out there versus just having to get a really broad list. And I mean, especially if you go after, local companies or Shopify stores, you can't get that list from anywhere else other than a provider who has scraped that data source specifically. Again, it always goes back to your level of proficiency and how advanced these things feel. But if you're an agency or if your job depends on using data at scale and you want to save on that, you can definitely stop complaining about it. And these are like the three easiest ways to go about building companies and targeting within Clay. That's the first one, and we're done. And I definitely intend on keeping it short. The second one is not tricky at all, but it definitely has a lot of info. So enrichment, right? On the first step, we discussed how you go about finding a list of companies. So you can either find the list of companies within Clay natively, always there as an option, and you can also always use other tools, use your CRM data, use intent-based tools, fetch the data within Clay, and then we go into the second step, right? Because you have the list of companies, but it's pretty much a list of companies that includes a lot of junk data, maybe not even including the data that you want. So there's a lot of steps towards having an actual list that you're going to be using in your campaigns. Two main types of enrichment, right? You have company enrichments and people enrichments. Company enrichments are the easiest ones. The first action typically within a Clay table is company enrichment. You can just use one Clay credit, and it's the easiest thing, and it's the most well spent credits I think you're going to be using in your entire kind of company life. But again, if you have a list of like the entire store leads list, it doesn't make sense, because these are stores you want to find LinkedIn company details and then be able to segment them even further. Another one which is really good, and it's a big takeaway from this section, is you can use the Apollo company enrichment. That is, if you have an Apollo API key. It's a little bit more cost effective than using Clay credits. But again, if you don't have an Apollo API key, if you don't have access to Apollo, you can just use Clay for company enrichments and you should be fine. Similarly, the more kind of like advanced levels, using any of Clay's 75 plus enrichments, it literally has more integrations with tools out there than any other platform in the world. And the thing here is I can't really offer a blueprint for like use this platform or use that platform, because depending on your ICPs and depending on the kind of data you want, you have to test out with small batches of prospects, a lot of different tools that fit your needs. And then once you've identified what data source works best for you and provide you the data you need, then you can get access to the appropriate API key just integrate it, and then you end up with Clay and most likely one other data source. So that's kind of like the first hack from the first kind of slides and input. And what we found is like Clay, and then the other main data source that you need, plus Apollo, which is one of the tools that really helps the process. There's another one. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it because it's a slightly white/gray hack. If you want to find if a company is using a specific tool, for example, we're doing targeting for a company that helps you build code in React using AI, and it does it in seconds. We want to know if that company is using React on the website, on the web app. So we just want to test out one specific tech criteria. You can use this with built with. You can build this using Clayagent and have that enrichment for free. No built with API
Yeah.
needed.
Yeah, I do a similar thing for revenue. So like ZoomInfo has SEO pages on pretty much any company's revenue estimate. And anybody who's done revenue estimates knows that they're not always completely accurate, but they're like at least within a relatively accurate range. And so yeah, we do the same thing. We're like, I think the cost to get revenue data in Clay is like 4 or 5 credits a company, and you can just use Clayagent to go look up ZoomInfo blank company revenue, and it'll have the exact same effect. So it is a little gray hat, and I guess like but at the same time it works, and
Yeah,
and
exactly.
also it's like it's not even really gray hat though, because it's publicly available
Yeah,
information. These companies are creating SEO pages with this information. We're just scraping it at scale. But I think it is a pretty great workaround. And I do also agree with your point on the previous slide where you were saying build out a clay table first and find which ones you use the most often. We have like that exact same process as well, where we'll build out a clay table with like 100 people in the list, or maybe we even do like 500 to 1,000 and like test out the campaign. And if the campaign's scalable, then we're like, okay, go get API keys. Because otherwise, you might waste a bunch of time getting API keys for a campaign that doesn't work, and then there's no point. So I agree with you on that.
exactly. Yeah, it might be the case, for example, that you want to get website traffic and you want to get really accurate website traffic data. You can test out SEMrush within Clay, see if you might want to target websites whose traffic has dropped or whose traffic has increased. Test it out with SEMrush, for example. Similarly, if you're doing SEO, you can get an estimate of the page speed score directly from Google. Like test it out, and then if you need the SEMrush API key and you see that you continue using it, just get the API key from SEMrush. Like you'll see your credits going down. So part of it is intuitive. Part of it is also having a process which doesn't always need to be like a clear SOP. It's like, okay, if we hit that specific threshold, let's do that. It's like, okay, once you've enriched more than, let's say, 100 prospects from within a specific data source, and you've seen that the data source works well, you're pretty much clear to go and get a plan. If it's like less than $100 a month, definitely go ahead and go with that. The other one, and this has been kind of a big pain point for a while, is finding people at company. So I have a few different ways to go about it, and I'll try to go through the slides without bothering everyone too much. The easy one is within Clay, use Apollo's find people at company with the Apollo API key always. It's very accurate, but you might get limited if you want to generate the entire TAM. So you need to have workarounds around that. Pretty much the one that works best is exporting the list of companies you have from Clay, uploading it to Apollo or LinkedIn Sales Nav, finding the prospects using any ICP parameters that you like, and then importing the list of employees back to Clay. That's kind of like the easiest way to go about it. Um, there's a harder way. For those, again, who want to implement more advanced things, you can use the Forager API key. I really hope that they build an actual integration with Clay in the coming months, because pretty much what Forager does, and again, I don't want to get LinkedIn to ban us all, at least my profile, for sharing this, but Forager pretty much has an API that goes and scrapes LinkedIn for you. You don't need to use your LinkedIn cookie or log into it or anything at all. Forager does that for you, and pretty much Forger's pricing, and I've included it here. It does cost credits, but if you look at the notes, one credit when finding people is includes an entire page scraped from SalesNav. So pretty much with one credit, you can get one page within SalesNav. So you input the domain and then any job titles you like, and you get the fullest list of companies you want. Again, some things are more advanced, some things are easier. This is a hack that definitely, if you see that you're getting close to hitting your TAM and you're looking for more prospects and you're sure you can find other people out there, this is a really good one to implement. Again, takes a little bit of work, but definitely doable. Um, then prospect enrichments, easiest and most straightforward one. You can use Apollo for people data. It's really easy. You can also use Lead Magic for people data. It's a bit more advanced because again, you have to use a specific template and use HTTP API. But other than that, it works really well. And then finding work emails. I wouldn't say anything other than using Clay waterfall enrichment. I'll share an interesting story because you're asking. So back in the day when we had a team of data analysts, we grew a team of around 30 people. When they couldn't find an email address, they would literally have an Excel sheet that would build a permutation of every possible work email. They would manually send out emails through Gmail, and whatever email didn't bounce, they knew it was the right email and the deliverable address. So I was really pleased, just to say the least, when Clay Waterfall Enrichment came into play. But again, even that requires you knowing which one of the providers to use, right? Like you see the entire list. I'm always like a kid in the candy store. I'm like, okay, I want to use all of them. Realistically speaking, there's no need to get API keys and access for all of them, and it will get pretty messy if that's not your main thing. So what we found out is Lead Magic first, then ICPs. Our team has grown to love ICPs for some reason. Then Prospero if you have access, Apollo also if you have the API key, and then any other providers using Clay credits. So you don't need API key access unless you find for a specific segment, let's say enterprise, which is usually in some cases a little bit more tricky. You need access to different API key. Again, you'll have to do a little bit more of testing, but if you don't want to do any testing, this is this is a list that we've tested and works pretty well. And then obviously, really easy, the bounce, get the API key to verify emails. It's like the cheapest one. I think they give you like 10,000 credits or something for really cheaply. So it's pretty much the easiest one. Um,
I can't
I
believe that was
go
your
ahead.
process in finding emails before. Like that sounds
We did
just
that.
hard.
We were doing that. I didn't know about it because my co-founder was managing the team. And at some point I was like, hey guys, how are we going about it? And they said like, oh yeah, this is what we do, Bill. I was like, I was completely like, I
Just
was
brilliant.
for like a minute. I was like, really, you're kidding me. That's why we don't get prospect lists delivered on time. So before Clay, like you can imagine why I'm so happy doing this because before Clay, building a prospect list would maybe take days or even like a week in some cases because it had to go through through multiple steps of putting together data from all these different sources. Not to mention Clayton, right? Our people were literally manually going to websites.
Yeah.
Step back. So the team was kind enough, and I have to give kudos to both Panos and Alkeos here, who did a lot of groundwork for the presentation here. There's a lot of compressed information in the slides to help us compare some of the costs between providers. So you'll see costs with using Clay credits versus getting API keys access. ICP is, again, one of our favorite ones, and not necessarily the cheapest in all cases, but definitely really, really cheap. Always number one. You also have Find Email and Prospero. The good thing about Find Email and Prosper is they both do both email finding and email verification. So if you have their API keys, it's kind of like a two-in-one solution. If not, Zero Bounce and the Bounce, they're both quite cheap, like literally a few cents of a cent for every enrichment. And we've compared the cost with spending 10K Clay credits, and it's quite interesting. So again, don't spend Clay credits if you don't have to. And I'm glad that I can say this publicly. So that's it. Yeah, I think we've gone through the rougher part. Some important findings on enrichments, and we've seen this again across multiple industries, multiple use cases. If you have to get like one API key, it's probably OpenAI, and then after that, it's probably Apollo for data. I know that some people are saying that their data accuracy is going down in some cases. It also has to do with what kind of prospects you're targeting, but we've seen that given its diversity, it's most likely the number one complementary tool you need to save Clay credits. So if I had to put together kind of like a strategy, I would say main data source used with Clay, plus main enrichment and validation tools for email. Like that's kind of the complete set you need to have. And then you can get API keys for ICPs and debounce. Again, these are really good. I couldn't not mention Clayagent here, especially clades into neon. Uh, Using new info from the latest webinar, this is what I kept. I think this is worth screenshotting. If you have really simple 1 to 2 step tasks, like grabbing information that's easy, visible, and really present on a website, doesn't require a lot of like thinking, always test out using OpenAI 4.0 Mini because it takes 1 credit, or Claude Haiku because similarly, it's like the cheapest one you can do, 1 credit. If you see that it doesn't work, typically try testing it out on 10 different prospects or companies with diverse kind of data sets. You can use Clayton Theon, which takes 2 credits. If you have something that's more complex, more open-ended, you want to get a list of outcomes. Plus, with Clayton Theon, you can also get a specific output structured in ways that you like. Clayton Neon is kind of like a in-betweener. It takes 2 credits towards the cheaper side of things. And then if you see that doesn't work, you can use GPT 4.0, 3 credits, and then Cloud Opus 4 credits. Again, I promised we'd go deep. This is, I think, as deep as you can get regarding getting some input on that.
Yeah,
Um,
also like
but
I've never, I mean, I haven't really gotten to the point yet where GPT-4 hasn't been able to do what I've prompted it to. So it is expensive for sure. I mean, as you can see, 3 times as expensive is the most simple task, but you can really give it a pretty heavy task or prompt and it'll probably get it done. So I found generally quite worth it if you're
yeah.
willing to put in, the extra money for the research to be done.
100%. I have a question on the chat that I have to address. Someone was asking about HVAC plumbers and all that. I would classify them as local businesses. So if you go back here within targeting and sorry to take a step back, local businesses are, I would call them like specialized targeting. You can use either D7 Lead Finder if you have access to that, or you can go directly into Clay. There's a Google Maps integration. It's probably the easiest thing that you can do. You start with a table from there. But if you want to get data for really cheap, plus some manual effort, you can use D7. I think there are other tools that scrape Google Maps, but pretty much if you want local businesses, they have no reason to be on LinkedIn, so don't try and do that. That's why I said that, if you want B2B data, go there. If not, you'll have to rely on Google Maps data. It's probably the most accurate thing you can have. So that's pretty much it on enrichment and targeting. AI enrichment, obviously, and model selection, always give it a shot. Try Claygen on diverse rows of data, see what you're doing before you start scaling. Again, this is how we ended up spending a really big part of Clay credits. Next part is segmentation, right? So you have the list of companies, you've generated the list of people from those companies, you probably have the additional columns with data, and now it's time to segment the data. Most likely, if you're doing enrichment within Clay, you'll also probably want to do segmentation because obviously having the enriched data without segmenting them and filtering out the ones that don't make sense is not really worth it. Interesting thing about this section, it's almost free. Like everything you'll see here, I have a disclaimer, but everything is almost free. And by the way, before you even get started, there's I'll say it in the end of the section. Stay tuned. So pre-segmentation using Clay formulas. Pretty much you can use AI within Clay to generate JavaScript to edit text. You can pretty much ask what you want in plain text, and you magically get JavaScript in return. And I'll show you a few examples. It's really easy to use. The first one is classify prospect by seniority level. There's obviously multiple reasons why you want to do that. Qualify or disqualify prospects based on your ICP, rank them and prioritize accordingly. Maybe you only want to reach out to the highest, most senior person within the company, or vice versa, or do a combination. And it also allows you to do additional enrichments only for top tier prospects. Let's say you only want to get, the contact details of the top level marketing person within the company. How do you do that? You don't just, what if it's not called CMO? You'll get the company list and then use the formatters in order to build a formula that allows you to literally find that person and then enrich only that person. And then similarly, you can adjust your outreach message based on their seniority. So if someone is more junior in the role versus more senior in the role, you can do it here. And these are some examples. Like if title contains founder or co-founder, output founder, if it contains chief, etc., etc. And you see some sample outputs here of what it looks like. All of that completely for free. Again, and it's not the only thing. Another one is classifying prospects by function. You can segment by different silos, let's say size of the team or anything else. qualify or disqualify prospects. I don't want companies that have an in-house marketing team. Why? Because I'm a marketing agency and I want to sell outsourced services. That could be an example. Or it could be I sell an AI tool for developers. And if you have a team of X plus developers, it makes a lot of sense for you to use this versus just having only one developer. So that way you can, again, prioritize your enrichments and adjust your outreach message based on pain points for each of the company. Again, you can see here different ways to go about doing this. Similarly with clay formulas. Last one, segmenting by time and role. So isolating those that are recent to the role and then either prioritizing your outreach and having different messaging or nice icebreakers based off of that. So if time in role says less than 3 months ago, you can get like a false or true kind of table. Here's, you can see an example. So you have your prospect, you have their contact details, and then you have recent to role, yes or no, and then you're able to filter based off of that. Now we go to the paid stuff. By the way, yeah, I said I'd mention it. There's an entire page of Clay documentation with all the free Clay formatters that you can use. We've nerded out on it. You can find it online. It's on the Clay website. There's no secret. I can send you the link afterwards if you like, but we've we've done a lot of digging to be able to have this kind of compact explanation here. The other one is paid segmentation using obviously your OpenAI key, no doubt about that. Two examples, ask ChatGPT a question using existing clay inputs to generate a response. This is what it looks like, and find any information from the web or the company's website using Clayagent. We've already seen what that looks like. Classic one, classify if a company is B2B or B2C. Depending on the accuracy, you can use this classification to exclude them or include them. You know, you might want to go to a conference and only target B2C companies, or get a list of companies from one industry and want to segment which ones are e-commerce versus sell to other businesses. Again, it's really easy. You set it up as a Clayagent search and you get company type, B2B, B2C, or yes or no. Another one that's really interesting as well is classifying companies as software or service businesses. It's typically a challenge to isolate software or service businesses from an initial company search because LinkedIn only gives you advertising services and really generic categories. So with this segmentation, you're able to clean up your list to match your ICP exactly. Again, we used to have people go to the website of each company and try and do it by hand. If you sell to both companies, this is a nice segmentation approach. So one of the things that we usually say is personalization in your messaging doesn't need to be done for every person, but if you find the right criteria to segment the list with, you can then include different messaging for each of the segments of your list. One of them could very well be if the company's selling to other businesses or only to consumers. Final one, using segmentation, using information from the web or the company's website. There's amazing use cases. What does the company's growth motion look like? Is it product-led growth versus sales-led growth? We were putting the slides together and I was literally like ecstatic when I was looking at this. I'm like, okay, you know, it's crazy being able to do that and address a company with such a specific positioning. You can do it by funding round, product listings. Are they doing webinars, right? Or do they offer employee benefits in their career page? Again, this is exactly what we're discussing when we're saying that you can scale your outbound with Clay and do it in a way that still feels personal, even in 2024. That's kind of like the gist of it when it comes to segmentation. And then it's about data cleanup, which is also kind of interesting. We've selected some of the ones that we like. First one is check if domain is valid, enrich data, then check if URL is valid, provide the list of URLs, and then run. It's an easy one to use. Extract company domain from email address. This is really easy, especially if you want to segment the companies based on their domain. It works if you only have an email list. Maybe you got it, you know, from your website, from a form you had on the website, from an expo or a conference. It's a nice combination with checking if the domain is valid, obviously. And by having a valid domain, you can build your table from there. Another one is normalizing the company name. If removing any LLC, limited, Inc., etc., remove unnecessary jargon and send a clean company name. So you can see the difference from one versus the other. Cloudem Inc. becomes Cloudem. Zoll Software Web Development Company becomes just Zoll Software, Vedex, etc., etc. Like it's really straightforward. Final one is normalizing first and last names. There's a lot of people on LinkedIn, for example, who want to include emojis, and I know it makes for a really nice LinkedIn profile. But then if you're reaching out to someone and you include the emoji next to their name, it's really obvious for them to tell that it's completely automated and you spend like zero effort in this. Again, this is something that in the old days you'd have to have someone manually doing it. You can now just automate the entire thing. You can also remove middle names and again be able to send hey clean name and hey first name and that's clean. You can see some examples here of what that can look like. Some of them obviously were cleaned up versus not cleaned up. The last one is formatting dates. And this is interesting because you want to transform any given date or time into a specific format. You can use a clean date in your outreach. Works well with recent to role or recent company news. Here are some examples that I'll zoom in a little bit here. Congrats on your new role, Patrick. Key findings since January. So this could be a really easy one to share with a new hire. Or this one could be congrats on your funding round this month or last month or last January. And continue from that. Again, it's a really easy one to structure. You can see format, date, and time. You can get only the month. You can get this recent to role. You can do a lot of interesting things here. Now, the final part, before I show you some complete workflows, is copywriting and personalization. Obviously, personalizing variables using ChatGPT is really easy and straightforward and probably a must. You can see kind of like a before and after. Hey, first name, we can connect you with customer profile, looking for main offering, open to learning how. This is something that 9 out of 10 times can increase your reply rates just by personalizing using specific variables. Pretty much what you do is you can use specific variables like the company industry, customer profile, target audience, main offering, format it in a way that fits within a template, as you can see on the before part, and then you can see exactly what the after part looks like. We can connect you with property managers looking for property management solutions. And this is a really easy one to set up. You can see some examples here. This is literally how you find the customer profile, and this is what it ends up looking like. Yes, you'll burn some credits, but it's probably the best credits you'll end up spending, and it's OpenAI key at this point. There's another one that has been a lot of buzz around lately, which is really interesting as well. It's Twain, which allows you to do email copywriting end to end, and it's really cool. And I'll discuss pricing in a sec. So you can see that it generated entire emails just using the input that we gave Twain. The interesting thing is it's really affordable to use. We made a quick comparison. You can use OpenAI ChatGPT, which is pay as you go. You use OpenAI tokens to generate personalized variables for emails. It still doesn't work really well for copywriting the entire email, but it can be used beyond messaging. So you can do research, you can combine it with Clayagent, et cetera, et cetera. Twain, on the other hand, is $59 a month, but as far as we can see, it has unlimited usage, and you can generate entire emails, but it's only done for email copywriting. So again, if you need help with copywriting, you can look into Twain. OpenAI still remains kind of like the best solution, but still, if you're looking for ways to save on credits, that's probably the best one to do it.
Yeah,
Um,
I've
Go ahead.
experimented with Plane a little bit, and I honestly think like it's a lot better than I expected it to be. I'll say that. Like it was, I still think if you have access to like a top tier world class copywriter, definitely still go with them, pay the extra money, they're worth
Yeah.
it. But if you don't have any experience in copywriting and are willing to feed a lot of company information into the tool, it can do a really good job for what it is. And I, I posted about it, I think like a month ago, and the founder reached out to me and he's now been updating me with all of like their product updates, and he's grinding to make sure it's like the best
Yeah.
AI writer out there. So I'm very bullish on the tool as a whole, and hopefully as the months go on, it'll just keep getting better and better.
Yeah, and I think one key thing to keep in mind here regarding Clay and the whole ecosystem that is getting built as we speak is in the past, you had the Apollo, you had the Bounce, the Never Bounce, and all of these tools had no incentive to work together. Maybe they had like one or two integrations, but that was it. One of the key strengths that we see with Clay is that it's actually built this ecosystem that companies have massive benefit to build on top of and also to keep improving upon. Because if they do that, then you buy the API key access and they make a lot of money out of it, or provided enough time and enough users. So it's really interesting that all these tools work kind of like as part of an ecosystem versus standalone tools that you just use. Now, before we end things and maybe open up for questions, we tried to map out the three main use cases that we outlined: the B2B broad targeting, more specialized data sources, and the last one, which is intent data. We have this in Miro, but we can definitely share. These are like kind of like just to give ideas. So B2B broad targeting, again, think targeting marketing agencies in the US. Find companies, it works for free. This is how you get the data from Clay. Then you obviously have optional enrichments, right? And that will definitely impact your cost depending on what you want to do. From built with, for tech stack of the company or a specific CRM they're using or anything else, SEMrush for website traffic and website data, Oler for revenue and funding. You could use Crunchbase or anything else you'd like there. Then you obviously have to find people. So we discussed obviously Clay, Lead Magic, Forager, and Apollo. The Clays, the costs are pretty much streamlined there. Varies, but definitely cheap. Finding work emails, again, waterfall enrichment, 1 to 2 API keys to use. The cost again varies, but it's really cheap at this point. Same for validating work emails, like either the bounce or zero bounce. You can definitely compare them against one another, but they're doing a really good job at it. That's kind of like the first one, and that's how you go about it. You have the main data source. Play is probably the easiest thing to use here. You have your optional enrichments. Your cost is going to depend on what additional data you want. You'll find the people, then segment and enrich them. That'll take a little bit of budget, but nothing much. And then you find emails and validate. Again, the last two steps, you don't even have to pay anything to Clay. It's like ridiculous that you can get all of this done. Similarly, specialized targeting, whether you start from lookalike companies, ecom data, technographic targeting, local businesses, you can still do these things outside of Clay. Again, in many cases, you might just have to pay for one tool once or once every 4 months. And then you can pretty much use the list of companies for the coming period. Find the people, again, really straightforward. Find work emails, validate work emails. It's exactly the same thing. And then the last one for real-time intent, you have your intent data tools, whether you're using website traffic, intent-based tools, job updates, CRM updates. You have your Bobora, LoanScale, Trigify, et cetera, et cetera. Yes, they have varied cost, but everything is pretty much around $100 a month if you need that specialized kind of data set. And again, you really have a streamlined, straightforward case for how you go with processing the data. That's why we had to build this format. Like when looking at the costs, we had to identify what are the main parts, and then how does each use case allow us to spend, but also identify what we're spending on and then optimize on the tools. That's pretty much it, guys.
Awesome. Figured we should turn it over to any of the questions that are in the chat. I feel like that would be pretty great. I have to imagine there's so much covered, so I'd have to imagine there's some.
All right.
But yeah, that
Hey,
was an incredible slideshow, and you should. I mean, maybe we can have if you can create like a link to the slideshow or something,
yeah,
or
for sure.
something like that. We should send it out to people who viewed this because I mean, I think it's just
Anyone
a really.
who registered will send the recording and the slides, just FYI, so you can take it at your own pace. I know sometimes I talk on 2x speed when I get excited. Okay, Grant has raised the hand, so let's go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for doing this. I had a quick question. So you talked about you can bring people in from Forager. I'm sure you could do the same thing with like Phantom
Apollo.
Buster or some other tool with scrape LinkedIn or even Apollo.
Yeah.
I'm trying to do this right now for like, if you're trying to target companies based on like the role title, and then sometimes that title doesn't quite fit. There's nobody at the company at that title. So
Yeah.
the thought is like just scrape all the company's employees and then try to find the best ones. So like, let's say you bring all those people in from Forager. What's your flow for paring that down and only selecting like the top 3 people at each company?
Yeah, so you have to go back to an org chart and identify what are the main when you're targeting people at a company, there's two main ways to go about it. The first one is like absolute title, growth marketer, and the second one is seniority plus job function. That's how we try to think about it. If you go about targeting job titles, specific job titles, you'll miss out on a lot of the data. So what we try and do for every search that we have is try and build it in terms of seniority and job function. And then you can use AI to try and understand what each of the job roles means. You can have filters that for the titles that seem straightforward, then you're able to identify the companies you like. You have like a yes or no column, so that's it. And then for the rest of the companies, one of the big benefits, and I think one of the biggest kind of advantages of using Clay is you can use Claygent or just OpenAI ChatGPT to understand what that title means and be able to group it. You might even use it with do Clay formatters and be able to extract it from there. But there's a really good chance you might just use ChatGPT and it will tell you, okay, this is a marketing role, or within those 1 to 3 job titles, this is the most one that's likely to have those responsibilities.
Awesome, thanks.
Yeah, I think the AI on top of it, if we're summarizing things, AI on top of the data and the ability to process that, bring in the data points and be able to process the data points is where Clay like definitely excels at. Like there's nothing else out there right now that does that exact thing. All right, let's try and go through a few questions. So what's the benefit of using Claygent with OpenAI API versus using only OpenAI API for research? I think it's exactly the same benefit, which is you don't get to spend Clay credits and you spend OpenAI AI tokens instead. So whether we call, yeah, it's exactly the same thing pretty much.
Yeah, I mean the only difference
Uh,
is that you can do the like PlayGen at scale within Clay. I mean, but yeah, you use the API key for OpenAI. It's the same thing. It's just, able to scrape the web for specific info. Also, while I'm talking, I saw one that was about Twain that I figured I could answer. It was email writing outside of cost. Do you think Twain's quality is up to OpenAI? Honestly, I think it's better. I mean, it's maybe competitive with Cloud. I think Cloud's like pretty good at email writing, but Twain's, I mean, they pretty much just, I'm imagining the back end of Twain is they're just getting OpenAI and training it on how to write email copy. So
yeah,
it,
exactly.
it should just be a better version of that, at least for that specific use case. So in short,
Uh,
yes.
it's exactly the same thing with building specialized agents for specific use cases like Clayton Neon, right? Like for the use case that you have it's probably the most cost-effective and efficient way to go about it. So yeah, you have a really good point. There's a good chance that they're using OpenAI, maybe a few additional AI models, training them on email-related data, and that way they're able to produce a better outcome than just using OpenAI. Yeah, OpenAI, I think I showed it at one of the slides. It's really good uh, for cleaning up the data and allowing you to include personalization variables. You can see it here. We can connect you with type of customer profile or target audience looking for main offering, versus Twain is able to generate like the entire email. Obviously, you have to make sure that the emails make sense and they resonate and all that. But yeah, one can do one specific thing and it can do it really effectively, versus the other is a little bit more broad. Um, can we get your LinkedIn profiles, please? Yeah, I think if you Google me and Patrick, you can definitely find our profiles, but we can share them on the chat.
Yeah, luckily we don't have the most common names in the world, so you'll be
We'll explore Twain. Nice, some really nice comments there. If you guys have any more questions, you want to raise hands. Otherwise, I'm just going through the chat. How much money are you spending using ChatGPT, using the API on a 10K prospect list, implementing 2 to 3 tasks at the same work table? Yeah, definitely implementing multiple tasks at the same work table. So when you have a prospect list, we would typically have between 2 to 5 columns with different data sets and then working and processing those data sets. It really depends. We typically look at the final cost based on the industry. I do have a few slides that I haven't shared with you guys. I shared them with the folks at the Clay London meetup. I think I have them here, where we have like specific budgets for specific types of businesses. I don't want to make it cause everyone a headache, but I can send them and they're included there. I think it depends on on what kind of data you want to process and how many different enrichments and segmentation tables you have and use cases. So it really depends. That's why we can have like an absolute recipe, but we try to build the formula with the 5 different steps that allow you to cost cut at every different one. Retail companies with bad reviews about their product on Amazon. I think that would be a nice task for Clayton and Nia, actually. You can definitely get a list of companies of Amazon brands. You can get that scraped. I think it's Smart Scout or a similar website that allows you to export those. And then you can use Clayton Neon to see what the average review is, and then segment to the ones that have the good reviews, reach out to the other ones. Bonus points if you actually identify specific pain points within the reviews and bring them up in the emails. That would be dope. Alan has a question. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you. Great presentation. So much information. So for someone that is totally new at this, what advice would you give of how to start?
That's a really good question. I would say identify what kind of outreach you're going to be doing. So let me go back to the basics. So is it broad B2B targeting? So are you if you're part of an agency, the bad news is you have to learn like most likely every use case. The good news is you'll be the most advanced person in outbound. If you're in-house, just try and identify what does your ICP, your typical ICP look like. Most likely you'll start from like broad B2B ICP targeting, and then you'll venture out into additional things, more specialized sources. The second one is identify what's the main data source you want to pull data from. So is it LinkedIn or Clay, if it's one of the two, or do you need to use a second tool? So I'd say the first part is identify which of these two you need. The third one is get obviously the OpenAI API key with no questions asked, and then get either the bounce or never bounce, and maybe one API key for finding email addresses. You can use pretty much ICPs. Like if someone put a gun to my head, I would say, LinkedIn Sales Nav, most likely one seat. Obviously your Clay seat for everything in between. OpenAI API, ICPs, maybe Prospel, and then the bounce or never bounce. Like these five.
For like just learning Clay in general, obviously it's like a very loaded tool with a ton of functionality, kind of hard to figure it all out early on, but Clay has this it's just clay.com/university. They have like a school where you can pretty much learn like the very basics of the tool and how it works. And that gives you at least a base level idea of how like the structure of the tool works. And then from there, you can I feel like the best way is usually to work backwards from a use case that you already have. So like if you have a certain goal, just trying to use all the tools at your disposal and all the ones mentioned in this webinar to achieve that goal, which you'll definitely run into a bunch of roadblocks, but it's like the best way to truly like actually get it down the line. So that'd probably be
Yeah,
mine.
I think there's a live cohort starting on Monday, if I'm not mistaken, or in about a week.
Yeah, they're Yash is like the Clay's head of education, and he's just constantly doing like live events and releasing videos on how to use the tool. I mean, the biggest blocker by far for anybody using Clay is that it's a really complicated tool to use. And the reason it has to be complicated is because it's super powerful and open. And if they wanted to make it less hard to use, they would have to compromise that. And so like their entire goal is just finding ways to make it easy for people to use. So if you like follow Clay on socials and you're in like the community Slack channel, you'll see a ton of things always happening on teaching people how to use Clay because that's like their entire goal. And obviously that's the nice thing. It's a nice thing for like agencies like ours because like like we just know how to use Clay and it's really hard to use. But Clay as a company wants everyone to be able to use it. So anyway, yeah.
Thank
That's the
you.
point. Yeah, 100%. I mean, in fact, like we're in the process of hiring Clay engineers, Clay experts, whatever you want to call that, and it's interesting. It's interesting the fact that you end up getting to train and having to train people, which again by itself makes a lot of sense because that knowledge is not out there. I think one of the big trends that we're seeing is that outbound used to be a sales-led activity. You used to have this team of BDRs, or you had the team of data analysts based in Asia. We did the latter. They did a lot of manual data and a lot of manual scraping. Yeah, its email was personalized because you built it by hand, or maybe you just dumped it on a tool and you just run campaigns. What we're seeing right now is outbound is definitely becoming harder because the AI tools are better on the client side, and I mean the Gmails and the Outlooks, and it's easier to mark people as spam, mark entire domains as spam. So obviously the antidote to that is AI, segmentation and personalization at scale. So how do you do that? You do it with Clay. Like that's kind of like the gist of it. The side effects of that are outbound is moving because it requires a lot of optimization and a lot of testing and optimization of the campaigns. It's moving from sales to marketing. Because again, if you think about it, marketing is one-to-one sales, versus marketing is one-to-many. So outbound, which used to be this one-on-one channel, is now becoming one-to-many, because you can, as a single marketer, as an outbound marketer or all-bound marketer, whatever you want to call the role, you can pretty much do the entire flow. You can build the lists, you can segment them, personalize using AI, and then add them on a tool and kind of like click play, and the campaign goes live. And you're one person, and you're talking in a personalized way to hundreds and hundreds of people every single day. So it's one of the interesting things, and I think one of the reasons why we're building things, and everyone's kind of like learning and building trainings and all that as we go, because the know-how was not there. It's entirely new. It's almost uncharted territory, and I personally find it really interesting. And this is the reason why we're in this space. It's being disrupted as we speak. Clay is one of the players doing that, so that's completely awesome if you ask me. Yeah, because it gives anyone the power to do it. Small run over. Do we have any more questions? No, and we're also on time, guys.
All of that.
Yeah. Patrick, thanks for co-hosting this. Panos and Alkeos again, massive congrats and thanks for helping with the slides. There's about like 90 slides in the presentation. Everyone, thank you for joining. It was amazing. We'll be glad to connect on LinkedIn or whatever. If you have questions, we'll send the recording and the slides to everyone who joined. Stay safe, and we'll keep in touch.
Yeah, appreciate it, guys. It was fun. And a huge shout out to Bill and of course the entire Sales Captain team for having such an awesome presentation. I mean, obviously some time went into it, so send it out because I'm sure people are going to be referencing it. I know I will.
Glad it paid out. All right. Have a good day, guys.
Appreciate you guys. Bye.